As for me, I am tormented with an everlasting itch for things remote. I love to sail forbidden seas and land on barbarous coasts. The book Moby Dick by Herman Melville is not just a classic of American literature. It's also an important testimony of the East Coast whaling industry in the 1900s and proof of a deep connection between the United States and the Azores. Melville's work of fiction depicts the harsh reality that whalers faced on board the Pequod. Among them, Daniel, from the Rocky Islands, which we know as the Azores. According to the New Bedford's Whaling Museum, where over 750,000 historical whaling artifacts are exhibited, the first registry of an Azorean whaler found in whaling ships' logs dates to 1765, 11 years before American independence, and 86 years before Moby Dick was published, after the authors had spent 18 months aboard the Acushnet with 4 Azorean whalers. The contribution of the brave Azorean men in the United States whaling industry is indisputably significant. Hence, later, in 1857, the first Azorean whaling company was established, kickstarting over 100 years dedicated to hunting sperm whales and using its soil to illuminate most houses. Investments came all the way from American soil, of course, in an attempt to join forces once more for the sake of wealth and prosperity. The last sperm whale was killed in the Azores in 1987. However, the more than 200 years of Azorean-American connection through whaling are being celebrated to this day through unique Azorean whaleboats regattas. In New Bedford, the Azorean Maritime History Society promotes an international Azorean whaling boat regatta, now on its 12th edition, in an attempt to remember and celebrate this historical connection. To help us connect the dots, we have the kind help of Lara Harrington and Donald Ray from the Azorean Maritime Heritage Society, and from this side of the Atlantic, Paul Goya and Ruth Mach, both participants in this international regatta. Join us as we dive into this historical connection, kept alive through traditions and friendship.
Started in 1997 by a woman, Mary T. Vermette, and she saw a boat in storage. I think that's how it happened. She saw a boat in storage and then commissioned to get one built. And so we still have that original boat. It's called the Bella Vista. And so Bella Vista is 27 years old. She's a very temperamental boat, asking to retire. And then we also have a boat named Fayal and a boat named Piku. So she had coordinated, she got her troops together and they coordinated a regatta in, I think it was just in Fayal. I'm not sure the date, but I can get you dates if that's some information that you would like. So we started doing alternating regattas. So we started doing one there and then 2 years later here and going back and forth. So in 2012, they were trying to get the teams that had gone over there historically were a little bit older, and they found that every time they competed against teams from the Azores, they were much younger and
Okay.
so they were trying to get a younger team together. So in 2012, my friends Robin and Melissa Branco, whose parents were founding members of Azorean Maritime Heritage Society.
What were the names?
His name
Melissa?
is Melissa Branco and Robin Branco.
Branco.
Yeah, Branco. So their parents were founding members. And so they asked if I would be interested. I'm a personal trainer by trade, and I used to play
Uh-huh.
soccer with Robin and Melissa. And so they asked if I'd be interested in being in a competitive team, um,
Okay.
rowing the boats. And so we row and sail on Clark's Cove in New Bedford.
Okay.
I live on Clark's Cove, so I had seen the boats um, for several years, and so getting a chance to go on the boat was very special. And
Okay.
then the rest is sort of history. I'm now the vice president,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been on the board most of the years that I've been involved. I've been on regatta teams since the 2013 regatta.
Okay.
I
So
know
the 2013 was your first regatta?
it was, yep.
So you have three boats, and the regatta is going to be three teams at a time, basically.
Right. So but also every race, there's three races at a time so that we all experience each boat because every boat is so individual.
Uh-huh. So,
Um,
I see. So you have three boats going at a time, and then for one, I don't know, what do you call it, a leg of, what's the term here that
I guess the technical term is a heat.
a heat.
Yeah.
So three boats per heat, and then you alternate the boats so that you experience all the boats and stuff. Okay, very cool. We're playing a little bit with Moby Dick, because there's one of the characters, Danielle, that Herman Melville included in the writing, and a couple of passages where he says that he doesn't know the reason, but the whalers from the Rock Islands were the best whalers, and so we're going with 172 years of history, and here you are tying that connection and making that link in a different way.
It's very interesting. We have some sponsorships for housing, and one of the houses that the crews are staying at is called the Whale House, and it actually used to belong to Melville, Herman Melville.
Oh, geez. Okay, there we go. There's another connection there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then
Okay.
every January we participate. We have there's a 24-hour or an ongoing marathon to read the book Moby Dick, but we do a Portuguese version as well. So there's a condensed version of the book, and so every January the Whaling Museum in New Bedford hosts the Moby Dick reading in Portuguese, and the Azorean organization has a big hand in that as well.
Okay. So I did read about that marathon, but I didn't realize that the Azorean Maritime Heritage Society had a hand in that as well. I thought it was between the museum and so forth. But are you connected with the museum or just separate altogether?
Yeah, so our connection to the Whaling Museum, actually, one of our boats, Bella Vista, is actually owned by the Whaling Museum.
Okay.
So the whole thing kind of started with when Bella Vista was built in Pico, and with this guy from Maine. They operated a school, a boat building school, wood boat building school in Maine, and he happened to go into the Azores and saw all the whale boats just sitting there rotting away, and he's like, what's all this? He's like, well, we don't whale anymore. What do we need whaleboats for? He goes, what about preserving the culture of the whole thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
So then they basically, he kind of came back, and together with his school and the Whaling Museum, they kind of formed they like an American Azorean alliance to build a boat. So they hunted down somebody there in Pico, John Tavares, and he built Bella Vista. And basically, this whole alliance between the Azores and New Bedford for our organization started with this lady, Mary Vermette, Dr. Mary Vermette. She was very interested in maintaining the culture connections between the Azores, and she figured the best way to do it would be through a maritime connection, which we've been whaling partners forever since whaling started, basically. So she had this great idea that we should form an organization, and there was recently a bill that had been built, Bella Vista, in 1996. And there was like nobody really take care of it. So she decided that we should be the ones that would take care of it and sail it around the Bedford and give a chance for young Azoreans and other people to actually sail an Azorean whaleboat, which would be a very unique experience in the United States, considering most people around the world have never sailed anything like that, especially in the United States. So she founded the organization. She was our first president. And that's how we became the Azorean Maritime Heritage Society, and we've been going strong ever since. Hopefully, living up to her dedication and of maintaining our heritage.
Very nice. And the first international Azorean whaleboat regatta took place exactly when? Do you remember? Either of you remember that?
I think it was 2001. I'm not really sure though. Lara, do you have anything?
That sounds about right. Donald actually got involved with the organization around the same time I did. So 2013 was both of our first regattas. Okay.
So now on the 8th, 9th, and 10th of September, you will be hosting the 12th Azorean Whaleboat International Regatta, with the participation of a female and male crew from the island of Pico and Fayal. Fayal, obviously, going back to the Dabneys, was a huge part of the economy, the whaling industry in the latter part of the 19th century. In Pico was probably the one of the 9 islands where the industry had the greatest impact, and so you will have a crew from Fayal as well, and they are very excited to participate in the regatta. I would ask you, Lara, what is the transition from playing softball, from being an athletic person and playing softball, going into an Azorean whaleboat and rowing in these regattas?
Well, it was soccer, not softball.
Oh, soccer. Okay. Sorry.
So it's interesting because as a personal trainer, I do a lot of one-on-one training. So in my the start of my adulthood, everything I did was solo, but growing up I had played soccer and I was always on teams. And I had forgotten what that was like until that day on the boat. We all get in the boat and we're learning how to row together, and it's not easy, as Calvino knows. It's
definitely not.
The first time you get in those boats, it feels like you have no control. So working on that together as a team, I think was probably the first, aside from it being culturally connected to me. My parents are from the Azores.
What island do you know?
My father's from Fayal.
Okay.
And my mother's from Terceira.
Very nice.
Yeah. So we're very connected to being Azorean, always have been. So being on the boats was a great experience, but then learning how to row along with a team sort of changed everything. And then when we had the regatta here in 2013, and we had no idea what to expect, and these teams from these islands show up, and just these great friendships developed. I'm still very close with people that I met back in 2013 that I see every time I go to the Azores. They're a big part of my life now. So that I think just the whole experience, not just athletic experience, has been incredibly rewarding.
That's true, because actually, before they were launching the boats in the water yesterday, your name came up, and the girls from Fayal actually said they had talked to you to make sure that they got the right house to stay in.
Yes, they have a
Donald,
lot of requests.
Donald, and what is it like for you, and how did you end up getting into the whale boat regattas?
And so I was at a friend's house that was very involved with the Azorean Maritime, and they needed some people that might have a little bit of sailing experience. So they asked me if I was interested in, maybe being on the sail team, and I said, yeah, sure, I'll try it. So I went down there, even though I didn't really have a connection with whaling or with the Azorean, heritage, but I went down there and I started sailing and rowing, and instantaneously I fell in love with the boats. I mean, they're such great boats, and I basically everything I had learned about sailing, I kind of went out the window because it's just a different kind of boat altogether. I mean, the basics apply, but the rest of it is just, there's no resemblance to sailing a modern sailboat, which I used to sail J24s prior to sailing an Azorean whaleboat. But nevertheless, it was a great experience, and I loved it, and I just continued on it, and continued, helping out and sailing and rowing. And I've now participated in three different regattas, and I love it. That's how I got connected with it. And I had some family in the Azores, and I had been, the first time I actually went there was in 1978. I actually saw a whale being caught at that time in Kaiser Peak.
Okay.
That was the very first time I saw it. But outside of that, outside of seeing that, I never had any connection with whaling. But I am from Trás-os-Montes, from Portugal, okay. And I have a family connection there. Direct family connection outside of my ex-wife and nieces and nephews and godchildren that I have there now.
Okay, so that's your connection. I was going to ask you if you had Picaroto roots, but Trás-os-Montes works as well. So it gives us a little bit more branching out in terms of the connections and connecting the dots. As
it is. When I noticed, the first thing I noticed when I went back in 1978 to Pico is how much the people from Pico sounded a lot like the people from Trás-os-Montes. And then there was actually a professor that did a study on where people originated from, and he kind of that what I thought actually was the truth. So there was a lot of people that immigrated from Trás-os-Montes to Pico. So. Okay. That's why we kind of sound the same.
Very good. And as president and vice president, what are some of the difficulties that you encounter in putting together an event like this?
I'll take this one, Donald.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that the biggest, our first challenge was housing. So we traditionally would do host housing, where everybody that would come to America would get split up into pairs or groups of 3 and spend their week in someone's home. When we go there, they always offer to host us together. So there's a certain level of camaraderie because you do spend that time together that they don't get when they come here, because they're always kind of shuffled around. So that was the first request from the women's Fayal team, was to be housed in a way where they could build on camaraderie with each other, because just because they are in close proximity, Fayal and Pico, doesn't mean that they have the opportunity to do that while they're there at home. So we were able to secure some sponsorships for housing, where we're able to do that for the most part. So we have 4 houses that they're sort of splitting.
And you can by all means mention the sponsors who are behind all of the housing and helping you put together this event. It's fine. So okay. if you want to do that, and especially the little nugget that you were telling me, that one of the houses actually belonged to Herman Melville, the author of Moby Dick.
Yes. So the Whale House, which is in downtown New Bedford, she did a partial sponsorship, and we are so the men's teams are staying downtown. So the Whale House is downtown. That's the house that was a Herman Melville house. It actually has a lot of great history in New Bedford and has been a big part of all the transitions that New Bedford has gone through since then. And then there's the Octagon House, which is also downtown. It's a historic home. Chuck is the owner, and he donated that house. It used to be a bed and breakfast, and now he actually he shut down his bed and breakfast, but he still offers it to the city of New Bedford for events and to nonprofits for any sort of housing needs. So he's very generous that way. And then we have a house, an Airbnb in the South End called Poseidon's Palace. This is the one that the Fayal woman requested.
Okay.
So it has an indoor pool, but it's also right on the beach. So he was very generous, donated the entire house for the entire week. His name is Alex Brito. He's Cape Verdean, so he was very excited to get involved with an Azorean event. And then my aunt and uncle are actually in Terceta until the end of September, so they let me use their house.
Okay.
And they're right next to them, yes. So the housing was the first hurdle, and that, once we got those sponsorships solidified, that allowed us some room to breathe. But then the tricky part is knowing exactly when they're arriving and fitting in all the things that we need to fit in before and after the regatta. So we actually didn't get the flight number for the cruise from Pico until yesterday.
Okay, and the cruise from Pico, do you happen to know? They're from all over the island, I'm assuming. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And Donald, anything on your plate, or does Lara just get to do everything?
Donald does a lot.
Definitely. Definitely, Lara has the biggest load, and she's the organizer. But we do have a lot of people that do help as much as we can. But there's a lot more to it than just the housing. But yes, most of it falls on her shoulders, the direction. But obviously, there's while they're here, they had to be fed. So we basically had to feed them at least twice a day. So that means involving the local clubs and we also have 2 events that will actually, like the award ceremony will be on Sunday and one of the local clubs, New Bedford Sports. And we also have then this event called Meet the Crew, which is also on Friday, right after the rowing races. So there's a lot of logistics that go into this, a lot, from housing to transportation. And one of the groups is actually flying into New York. So New York and Boston are not anywhere close to each other. So that means we have to actually, go get them at JFK Airport in New York City, which is 4.5 hours away from where we are.
Okay.
So there's a lot of logistics involved. Everything is last minute. But the whole regatta itself is kind of a very inexpensive proposition. And even though we do have donations from housing, like we did, but there's still, we still got to feed 40 people the whole week that they're here. So, and considering that we're a nonprofit and all the money, we have no help at all from the government over here. So all this has to be, it's a fundraising effort that we have. So even though it's a 3-day event, in reality, they're here for a week. And for us, it's basically a 1-year event. So we start planning as soon as the regatta ended the last year. We started the planning process, and we've been at it ever since, between raising money and going to, doing the whole planning. But yes, Lara is taking the brunt of it, though.
Well, we have a really large, wonderful committee for the regattas. So I take everything and put it together, but I have a lot of help for sure. And the boats are always a lot of work.
It seems like the involvement of the community is very good, and that they're very open to this type of interaction between the islands and the U.S. where they reside. Is that correct, or do you have another?
There are members of the committee of the community like Fernando Neto, which is a very successful businessman here in the United States, is originally from the Azores, and and they actually go out of their way to then donate funds to help our cause. And of course, that there's a lot of people from the community that enjoy watching the boats and seeing the boats in sailing or rowing, and of course, it generates excitement among the community when they're here. But as far as like people coming out and donations and things like that, it's not really we're not in the forefront of it. There are a few people from the community that do help, but the majority of the community enjoys the whole experience. But it's not like a community event like the Madeira Feast, for example, something like that, where everybody gets involved. So.
Okay.
But but we generate a lot of excitement, and we generate a lot of members because we're a member-driven organization. We usually generate members from having the international regatta here and the excitement that it builds during that time. There's a big percentage of people from in Massachusetts. I think we might be like the third largest immigrant population in this area. So yeah, and the majority being from the Azores. I mean, New Bedford, Fall River, that area there, I would say probably about 60-70% Portuguese, with that almost 90% of that being from the Azores. So there is definitely a lot of cultural exchange between the Azores. I mean, we just had the Holy Ghost Feast in Fall River just this past weekend that draws, I mean, the Vice-President of the Azores is here. I mean, everybody is like, it draws hundreds of thousands of people. We actually participated in their Bold Late, the parade there that they had. So yeah, the culture is very strong. Besides, we're just a component of it. But I think that we're kind of unique though, in the idea that we have something that very few people, whether it's in the Azores or even here, actually participate, especially younger people. I mean, obviously, back in the whaling days, there was a lot of people in the Azores that went out whaling, a lot of them, and they had a relation to that, even if they were not actual whalers, but their families might have been whalers. And so there was a big, huge connection to whaling. But since whaling stopped back in the day, that kind of went away. So I think we're very unique. Anybody that really becomes sees our boats or becomes a member of our organization, they're experiencing something that very few people do, even in the Azores. So,
definitely, absolutely, whaling is a very big part of the Azorean DNA.
Yes.
On the other side of the Atlantic, 4 teams, 2 from Fayal and 2 from Pico, will be joining the International Regatta in New Bedford. Ruth Matos and Paul Correa, interviewed by Connecting the Dots, show optimism and won't deny the competitiveness of the event. We're here at Hortas Marina with 2 veterans of the International Regatta. I'd like to ask first to Paul Correa, what are your expectations for this regatta, since this is your 3rd time participating? Well, yeah, it's the 3rd time, and we'll do our best, try to win, and bring home the victory, especially in the rowing. And Ruth, I assume it's harder, since these boats were dominated by men. I can't agree with you. I think both masculine and feminine teams are acquainted with the boat and with the sport, both in sailing or in rowing. I think this is a very gender equal sport. And for you, what does it mean to participate in this international regatta held in another country? Well, I think for starters, it's the unification of the whaling history that connects these 2 countries. Celebration of the whaling history and connection celebrated in New Bedford the same as if it was in Fayal or Pico. The continuity of this project is very important to maintain the heritage and promote this historical culture interchange, reassuring our identity and continuing to save the whaling culture in time.
todo o nosso património e as nossas vivências e esta continuidade do que é a cultura baleárica.
Since this is your third participation as well in this regatta, how do the ladies from Fayal see this regatta?
Participam nesta regata.
Eu acho que cada vez mais.
I think more and more the teams, even from Pico and also the New Bedford teams, have evolved through the years, showing more and more training effort, translates regatta to regatta, and an overall performance increase for all the teams. There is really an effort so the heritage and the event keep living throughout the years. What are the main differences between training here in Fayal and competing there in New Bedford? Second time I participated, it was on a different place than the first time. The bay was different, totally different, but on this second time the seas were far more calmer than on the first time, and hopefully on my third participation it stays the same. But there aren't many differences from the seas we encounter in New Bedford and the seas we encounter here in Fayal. Sometimes we practice in fairly rough seas too, and we'll try to take everything we've learned here and put it in action in the regatta. And obviously try to finish, that's the most important.
Gostaria de perguntar.
First of all, I'd like to ask, is this a sport acknowledged by the Portuguese Sports Federation? No, at the time being it's not, but in my opinion it should be acknowledged in the future. In the future it's more than a valid option. It would be a way to protect this heritage.
Também seria uma forma de promulgar e proteger esta cultura.
Sim, exatamente.
Sr. Paulo,
Mr. Paul,
qual é a diferença
what is the
necessariamente
big difference
de tipo de embarcação
from this type of boats
para outro tipo
to other type of vessels that are involved in nautical sports? Well, this is a boat that wasn't prepared to compete. It was a boat to hunt down sperm whales, but we adapted it to rowing. It's a very heavy boat. It's made of wood, and I never rowed in anything different, so I can't tell you if there's much difference. But I think for me, somebody that's not used to rowing in this type of boat is going to have a hard time. But hopefully everybody keeps sailing and rowing in these boats, because we're seeing a very big lack of attendance in this sport. So I also would like to see the schools and the PE teachers trying to show this to their students so they can see for themselves and practice in order to keep this tradition going.
The other aspect is when we talked yesterday with the two crew members here from Fayal, they're going to participate in their third regatta. And they seem to be very optimistic and very determined to give you guys a run for your money in the regatta. So what is it like from your perspective?
Yeah, they're always like that. I think that stems from that 2013 regatta where they were expecting to show up and have to race against a team of people that were twice their age, and then they came here and saw that we were a bit competitive, and they maintained that. I mean, they have the trophies, we don't. So, and they definitely experience, you know, the big difference between us and them is that, or them and us, is that they actually participate in regatta. So they actually are racing these boats throughout the season, which is a huge advantage. The start of the race is always the trickiest part, and they have a ton of practice for that. So it's hard to mimic that here in New Bedford. But considering that we don't have that, I think that we're always pretty good competitors for them. It's for us, it's a fun thing. It's, you know, an extraordinary event. It's a very unique experience, and so we sort of approach it that way. But it's not to say that we're not competitive. And I would say the women's team here, because I think the women's teams from here and from Fayal are generally pretty close, and there's a really great camaraderie between all of us. So we like to be competitive with them. It's nice to at least feel like you're worthy of being in a regatta with these crews, because they are really great at what they do. It's really awesome to be a part of it.
That's really awesome, and I am certainly very happy to see that this connection that exists over the hundreds of years is well entrenched in both sides of the Atlantic. And so this regatta plays a wonderful role in terms of bringing people together, from what I'm getting from the both of you. And so I'd like to thank you for all your efforts for keeping the tradition alive. And I know very well what you're saying, that it's not easy at all to embrace this endeavor. But kudos to you both for doing this. It's totally awesome, and we really enjoyed doing this story. I think it's a very unique story, as Donald said. New Bedford being one of the biggest whaling cities in the United States, and in the heyday of the whaling industry, obviously one of the economically more prosperous cities of the East Coast, and so we've been a part of that over the years, and a lot of that credit goes to you, who are there in the trenches and doing all the work to keep all this together. So thank you, and then I'll leave the last words to the both of you, and we can go ladies first, or president first, however you guys want to work it out.
Ladies first is good.
Well, I'll just add to what Donald was saying before about how deep our, you know, the Azorean roots go in Massachusetts. And what makes us unique as an organization is that we provide an Azorean experience here. It's not just about who we are and who we're connected to through politics or community, but an actual experience on something that's very historical and very unique to the Azores. I had mentioned earlier that we have the only 3 Azorean whaleboats in the country. So we actually launch our boats out of the community boating center in New Bedford, and they have some really wonderful kids programs all summer long. They also teach adults. So this year we had an opportunity to add Azorean whaleboat programming to the community boating center, which makes them the only community boating center in all of the country that offers Azorean whaleboat experience. That being said, one of our big missions is cultural exchange. So in our organization, we have a mix of all backgrounds. It's not just a Portuguese organization. It really does promote the Azorean experience. Again, so it's really interesting to bring, it's really wonderful to bring people of all backgrounds onto the boat and get them to be fascinated with our culture and fascinated with these boats and the history of it all. And then see them really become a part of the organization and get involved in regattas and everything else. So the only way, because we don't have a huge influx of Azorean people coming here. And I know I'm Azorean, but my husband is not. So it's not like Azoreans are marrying Azoreans. So one of the really important things in order to keep this heritage alive is to share it with other cultures and other people in the community. And that's something we take a lot of pride in. And I think something that we do really well as an organization.
Absolutely, and congratulations on that. It's totally awesome that the youngsters are being involved in this centuries-old tradition, and that was part of the way people were able to eke out their living here in the Azores, and so it's terrific. Donald?
Well, yeah, I just add on to that because like another thing is a lot of the people that belong to our club are not of Azorean heritage. But one thing is for sure that even though the very first time they might go to the Azores is because of the regatta, but I know everybody that has gone for the first time because of the regatta, they come back with their families. They discover the Azores. Not only are they discovering the Azorean culture, but they've actually discovered the Azores, and it's just fantastic to see somebody that has no, that was born, 1,000 miles away from New Bedford. They now live in New Bedford. They got connected. They went to the Azores, and now they're like, that's where they vacation. So it's a fantastic situation where anytime we go over there and we expose people that are not from the Azores, that have no connection to the Azores, but we expose them to the beautiful islands that they are, and they go back and vacation there with their families. So it's a great thing. It's like the old country discovered the new world, and now we're rediscovering our roots.
That's it. And so would it be fair to say that the 13th International Regatta is going to be held in the Azores?
We have our fingers crossed for sure.
Yes, but it probably won't be next year. It'll probably, we typically skip a year. COVID
skip a year, but in 2 years from now, then
we're hoping
the regatta should be held here in the Azores. I know it's been held in Fayal. Has it been held in Pico before?
So we normally that's one thing we would like to change if we could, because it does create a little bit of a logistics nightmare, because we normally split the regatta between Fayal and Pico every year that we're there. Every regatta that's in the Azores is always half of the regatta is held in Fayal, and then half of the regatta is held in one of the clubs in Pico. But it's like a nightmarish kind of thing with the accommodations and the whole thing. So we're hoping to continue that, but just maybe alternate where the whole sailing and rowing will be done in Fayal one year, and then the next regatta will be happening in Pico. But I mean, that's just our suggestion. But yes, we are hoping they will continue the process of back and forth. We went back to back because of during the COVID we had to skip. So to try to make it up, we went back to back. But it did cause a little bit of a strain on our financials here because of the back-to-back regattas. But we're hoping to get back on schedule, and we have to continue going for many, many years.
Once again, in the name of connecting the dots, we'd like to thank all the involved in this third episode, and a special thanks, of course, to Lara and Donald and Paulo and Ruth. It was truly an amazing experience, and we are really happy to get to pass along and talk about this really important and historical connection between the United States and the Azores. This was Connecting the Dots. Thank you very much for watching. Please follow us on Facebook and on Spotify, and we'll catch you on the next one.